I know. I'm a few days late to it. Leave me alone. I took the weekend off, and but we're gonna do it anyway because it's my channel. I get to do what I want. Hey everybody, Nick from 9CardTCG, and today we're going to be looking at a tier list that was created by Luke from Celios Network, so thank you very much for the template, and we're just going to look at this for EUIC and some other upcoming major tournaments. But before we get to it, if you haven't already, do me a favor and leave a like and a comment. Maybe hit subscribe on this channel, because doing all those things tell YouTube that this is a good channel and other people should watch it. If you're in the market for some TCG accessories, I am now affiliated with Dragon Shield, which means you can use the link in the video description to get yourself some awesome Dragon Shield matte sleeves. Then the only ones, I have this box sitting here all the time. It's just always next to me. They're the only ones I use. You show up to regionals looking and feeling like a pro. If you use that link, I get a kickback, which means I can make more and better videos for you guys. Lastly, if you want to help support the channel a little bit more directly, you can become a YouTube member. Click the join button to see all the different perks you get, but none of that is ever expected. Just you being here watching is enough for me. Now, with all that out of the way, one thing will never change is my inability to speak. With all of that out of the way, let's pop over to the tier list maker and check out these decks. Before we start, I want to issue a little disclaimer, and I guess it's a multi-part disclaimer. The first part of this is that these are my opinions. This is not a definitive list. This is just my opinion of decks, and you are welcome to disagree with them. I'm not going to be offended. I'm not going to be upset. I don't want you to take it super seriously for two reasons. One, you might have a different opinion of a deck, especially a deck that you really like or want to play, or your favorite deck. Just because it's listed low or that it's not on this list, it does not make it bad. It just means that that's where I put it. The other thing is that even if you have a deck that's listed in tier 2, for example, and that's the deck you want to play, or that you're going to be playing at Indy, New Jersey, EUIC, whatever, I say still play it. Play the deck that you personally are best with. Don't pick up Mew because it's listed in S tier. Surprise, Mew's in S. Don't pick up Mew because it's an S tier and then you have no idea how to play it, or you're not very good with it. Play the deck that you are best with. If that's Ice Rider, or that's Gengar, or that's Single Strike Urshifu, whatever deck it is that you are really good with, you're gonna perform better with a deck that even it's listed, even listed tier 2, if you know that deck's matchups, you know the deck in and out, you know the lines of playing and all that kind of stuff, then that's the deck for you. So this is mostly just for fun and just to let people know where different decks stand, but also maybe if you are undecided on a deck, maybe this will help you kind of identify what decks might be really viable and also what decks you can expect to play against, right? That's half of the battle of playing in any tournament, is playing in the tournament and playing against another person who's going to be picking a deck. Now, we went on this too long, so let's start. We already said it. Mew is S tier. It's super fast, super powerful. You can hit turn 1 Mellow at a 210 if you're going second. So basically what happens, if you are a little bit unfamiliar, Mew has a supporter card called Elisa Sparkle that lets you search your deck for a Fusion Strike energy and attach them to 2 of your Pokemon. So you can get 2 Fusion Strike energies in play, and then you attach 1 from the hand. Now you have 3. Melodious Echo is an attack on a card called Meloetta that does 70 damage times the number of Fusion Strike energy you have in play. Now all of a sudden you're hitting for 70 times 3, which is 210. Most Pokemon V have 220 health or less, which means for just 1 power tablet, which increases your damage by 30 that turn, or a choice belt, which if you're hitting a Pokemon V, your attacks do 30 more damage, you're hitting for 240, which is enough to knock out any Pokemon V. Realistically, you could even knock out Pokemon V stars by hitting 270, 280. You can also go as far as 310 if you hit the absolute nuts. So you could do all of that your first turn if you go second, which is one of the things that makes Mew super powerful. Genesec's going to allow you to draw. Mew Cross Fusion Strike is a really good attack. You can copy any attack on your bench from Fusion Strike Pokemon. It has free retreat. It's just a super, super good deck. Speaking of really good decks, it's going to take me a minute to find stuff, so we're just going to kind of go in a random order. Arceus Duraludon, I think, is a tier 2. Arceus and Duraludon. Arceus is very, very good, and you're going to see it a lot today. Duraludon is also good, but it suffers from a little bit of consistency issues. It suffers from a little bit of Path to the Peak can really, really hurt this deck. So if your opponent's playing Path to the Peak, it shuts off the Skyscraper ability of Duraludon, which prevents Pokemon with special energy from dealing damage to it. Great ability, but you know, if Path sticks, if Path sticks, and someone plays Path to the Peak, which turns off abilities from Pokemon with rule boxes, like Arceus V-Star, like Duraludon V and Vmax, you're going to be in a little bit of world of troubles. One of the issues with Duraludon is, aside from Path to the Peak, other opposing Arceus decks exist, and they're going to be accelerating basic energies from the deck to benched Pokemon after using Trinity Charge or Trinity Nova. So let's just pretend that you have an Duraludon Vmax in the active. Even if they don't do damage with Trinity Charge or Trinity Nova, because they probably have a double turbo energy, they're accelerating energy to the bench, which means now they can start hitting into your Duraludons. It's a little annoying, and the odds of you having that Duraludon in the active really, really early is kind of low, because you want to use your own Arceus to accelerate energies to your Duraludon. So, you know, you lose to, I mean, I shouldn't say you lose, but you struggle with decks that use a lot of basic energy. That's anything with Arceus. You struggle to any other Suicune or Ice Rider decks can be difficult matchups. Anything with Path to the Peak can be really difficult for you. So still a good deck, but not as high as, you know, you might want it to be. Another tier 2 deck is probably Gengar Arceus. It's a good deck in at one Salt Lake City, but it just doesn't, something about Gengar decks are going to land it in tier 2 today. You might be able to argue that this is tier 1.5, and I might change this as we go along. Right? I can do whatever I want. None of this is set in stone. Gengar Houndoom especially is definitely tier 2, because it suffers from the same issue as Single Strike Urshifu, and I'm going to put them both there now. The reason why is because they're both the same deck for the most part. They both rely on the Houndoom engine to accelerate energies to your Single Strike Pokemon, whether that's Gengar, Urshifu, or Umbreon. They serve the same purpose for the most part. Take big knockouts on Pokemon, especially ones that utilize weakness. So if you're hitting an Arceus, or maybe you're hitting a Jolteon, Urshifu is really good. If you're hitting a Mew or something else that's weak to Dark, Gengar and Umbreon are really good. But they're super inconsistent, because you can draw into all your evolution Pokemon when you don't want them, when you need basics. You can draw into all your Urn of Vitalities. You can draw into all your Single Strike energies. You can not see Urns, or you can not see evolution Pokemon when you, like, there's so many things that can go wrong. Even though Single Strike Urshifu is my favorite deck of all time, it just doesn't work as well as we want it to in this particular meta. Let's go on to Leafeon, and unfortunately I had to put Leafeon in a little bit of a bottom tier, mostly because it doesn't really hit a lot for weakness there. There's some grass weak dark types, but its best matchup was Single Strike Urshifu, because Umbreon's weak to grass, and Single Strike Urshifu has a retreat cost of 3, but it's not really seeing a lot of play right now, and it's not doing very well, so one of your better matchups isn't around. You have a terrible, terrible Mew matchup, because Mew has free retreat. Could you maybe start trying to boss trap some Genesects and stuff? Yeah, maybe, but they're going to find the switch or the escape ropes and things like that. They're going to find their own stadiums. They have Cramomatics to find the exact cards they need. Granted, they have to discard an item, flip a coin, and hit heads, but for some reason, Mew always does it against me, so it's not super reliable. If you don't have a Galar Mine in play, your Grass Knot attack will do 0 damage to a Mew, because again, they have free retreat. Just not a particularly great deck at the moment. It can still win games, don't get me wrong, it can still win. But relative to all these others, it's at the bottom of the list. Other things that are at the bottom of the list is Rapid Strike Inteleon, and I know there was a little bit of talk from individuals like Tord about testing Rapid Strike Inteleon, and maybe this will change in the future as more people learn how to play it a little bit better, how to handle certain matchups, how to, maybe the list isn't particularly optimized at the moment, but for whatever reason, it's just extremely passive, and the damage output is very, very slow. I understand the strategy is to chip away constantly with Double Gunner, bounce the energy back to your hand, and do more damage with whatever height max snipe or whatever attack Inteleon has. You have quick shootings to help put some chip damage and ping damage, and then you heal with Cheryl, and then you just keep continuing that. It doesn't always work. It takes a long time. You might not finish a lot of games because you're constantly healing, bouncing, and not doing a lot of damage back to your opponent. So you might experience several ties in a best-of-3 situation, which you can't tie in tournaments that much, right? In a regional, to make day 2, you need 6 wins, 2 losses, and 1 tie at the minimum. So if you have 3 ties because all your games take forever because you are constantly healing and you are chipping away very slowly at Pokemon, you're just not going to get where you need to go. And that's one of the reasons that this deck is listed kind of low. I'm going to put Suicune in tier 1.5, Suicune Ludicolo. It definitely benefits from having a lot of Vmaxes in the field or in the meta, because Suicune hits for up to 220, maybe even 250 with something like Big Charm. Usually you're running Cape of Toughness, but Suicune with Ludicolo, the Enthusiastic Dance ability, makes your basic Pokemon's attacks do 100 more that turn. So that 220 max of Suicune now becomes 320, and now you're taking one-shots on things like Mew Vmax, you're taking one-shots on Arceus V-Stars, Gengar Vmaxes, because they likely have, especially in the Houndoom version, because they have used Single Strike Roar, which puts damage onto them. Urshifu Vmax, again, they're going to damage themselves, and they'll be 320 health or less. You are really able to one-shot pretty much anything in the game, especially if you're able to get a quick shooting or 2 off. It's just a really consistent deck, and being a strictly 2 prize deck, or maybe even lower because you can attack with the Shady Dealings in Inteleon, Cape of Toughness, 260 health, basic Pokemon is pretty annoying to deal with. So it's a good deck. Fleet Footer is a great ability, being able to attach, and then Melony, attach Raihan. Like, you have so many ways of just slapping down the Pokemon attacking. I think it's a really good deck. It's super consistent, and it did really well at Salt Lake City, I want to say. I think it came, I don't know if it came second, I don't remember, but it did pretty well, and I think Suicune is a little bit maybe underrated at the moment. Another tier S deck is, of course, Arceus Inteleon. This is the straight Arceus Inteleon build. It is very, very good, very consistent. Being able to have a 280 health, 2 prize Pokemon, maybe even 310 health, which, by the way, is more than some Vmaxes like Jolteon, is incredible. And then you have the consistency of the Shady Dealings engine. Trinity Nova is a very powerful attack. Starbirth is an incredible ability that lets you just once per game search your deck for any 2 cards you want. And if you search your deck for a Path to the Peak as part of that Starbirth, you get the other cards you need. Oh, now your opponent can't use their Starbirth, and unless they have a stadium or something. You can really slow your opponent down like that. Maybe you force them to use their Shady Dealings to find a stadium when they needed to find something else. Like, you can really mess with your opponent's strategy. You know, your opponent hits into you with an Arceus or whatever. They don't knock out your Arceus V-Star. Well, now you're able to Sharon's Care, get all that damage off, pull everything back to the hand, and then set up a new Pokemon, start attacking. It's a very, very good deck. You're gonna see it. You're gonna see Mew. Learn it. Learn how to play it. That's the best advice I can give you. The Dark Box single prize. This may or may not have something like Galarian Weezing. This may or may not have something like Sableye. We're going to put it at the top of tier 2 for now. That might change, but basically the whole idea is to handle things like Mew as best you can, but you even then don't really handle Mew that well. Don't tell Mellow Magikarp I said that. It's a good deck. It's a single prize deck for the most part, which means you are able to take consistent attacks, but you often don't have that damage output. You're kind of relying on using Sableye often to take big knockouts on Pokemon Vs and Vmaxes and stuff like that. But with the presence of V-Stars, you have to work that much harder, especially things like Arceus. Hitting 280 is not particularly easy, and even when you do, you're not being rewarded with 3 prizes like you would a Vmax. You're only getting 2 like a regular V, so you got to work even harder to get the same result. And that's one of the reasons this deck kind of takes a little bit of a dip in where it falls on this tier list. Jolteon, I'm going to put it 1.5. We haven't really seen any tier 1 decks yet, but we will in just a moment. Jolteon, its pressure comes from 2 areas. Path and Prey, so playing Path at a Peak, then playing Marnie, and hoping your opponent can't respond is a legitimate strategy for this deck, and it's a really good one for a lot of decks like Arceus, for Mew, for Suicune, things, or the Rapid Strike Inteleon. What else is on here that uses an ability? There's just a bunch of Pokemon, even opposing Pokemon like Galarian Zapdos V, Galarian Moltres V. They have abilities. Path will shut them down. It becomes kind of problematic at times. So playing Path to the Peak, then Marnieing your opponent down to 4 can be a really annoying and really good strategy. But the other thing that Jolteon does really well is and I forget who was saying this. It might have been Luke from Celio's Network, and it's something that I agree with and try to tell other people personally, is it puts you on a clock. Your Jolteon's attacks max Thunder Rumble, hits the active for 100, and if your opponent's bench Pokemon has any damage counters on them, you can choose one of them and do 100 damage to it. So you throw down a Galarian Zigzagoon to hit the bench, and now you're hitting both the active and a bench Pokemon for 100 damage with Max Thunder Rumble, and you can do that with just 1 energy if you have an Elemental Badge, I think it's called, attached to it. So you can be doing this really, really consistently, cycling through Pokemon. It's going to be really easy to Cheryl away any damage, so then you just attach another energy, because again, Max Thunder Rumble is just a single attachment. Now your opponent wasted their attack, they didn't get the knockout, and you're still hitting for 100 to the active, hitting 100 to the bench, and you are putting a ton of pressure. You are either picking apart their support Pokemon, their Drizzles, their Sobbles, their Dunsparce, whatever it is, bench support Pokemon they have, and you're also putting pressure onto the active. Maybe you're putting pressure onto a secondary V Pokemon, and like, alright, even when this active gets knocked out, or even if you switch, I'm still going to take 2 KOs, and I'm going to get 4 prizes. It's only a matter of time before I pick off a Sobble or 2, and then game over. So it really puts you on a short clock, and you have to be able to deal with it quickly, and Path to Marnie makes that a little bit more challenging. So I do think it's a little bit better than some people might give it credit for. Its big issue, of course, is all the fighting types running around. It definitely suffers from that a little bit, but there's still a lot of not fighting. There's still a lot of Mew, there's still a lot of Arceus Inteleon, there's still Suicune, there's still Duraludon, there's still Gengar. There are non-fighting types in the format, so it's not like it's an auto loss to everything. Here's a tier 1 deck. Rapid Strike Urshifu Moltres, very, very good deck. This list is inspired by Robin Schultz, who won a regionals, and I don't remember which one, and I feel bad, but it was a very good deck, and it had a ton of 1-ofs, and it while being very good, is a very difficult deck to play. So if you are planning on playing Rapid Strike Urshifu and you want to play with the Baby Moltres package, you have to really put in the time. I'm not being like, oh, it's like Mew, it's a difficult deck to... No, this deck is tough to learn. I mean, you have very few resources. You have 22 in the original list that Robin came up with. You have 22 1-ofs, which means if you use a card at the wrong time, or you waste a card because you had to discard something, you're out. That's it. You're out of luck. You don't have it anymore. It's not like a regular deck where you have 3 researches, 4 researches, and all right, fine. I run a bunch of cards. It's okay to lose 1 or 2 of these because I know I have more in the deck. No, not with this one. You have very limited resources, and you have to use each one with purpose, with intent, and If you don't, you're going to be playing this deck to a lower efficiency than you should, and that's going to really hold you back in the long run. So while it is a very good deck, I don't, and I've heard a lot of people say this, I don't expect a ton of people to either A, play it, or B, play it with real efficiency, because it's just super difficult to learn unless you're putting in the time now for like the next month of just playing this deck over and over, really learning the matchups and the lines. I would advise against it most likely. Let's do another tier 1 deck. Is going to be Arceus Birds, Arceus Inteleon with Birds. So the Galarian Zapdos, Galarian Moltres, Baby Moltres. This is like an Arceus box. You have your Shady Dealings line to help you be a little bit consistent. You have your Arceus to power up your bench Pokemon. And then you have things like Zapdos V and Moltres V to deal with, you know, if you're opposing Arceus, opposing Gengars. For Zapdos is perfect. You have Moltres to deal with things like Mew, Dragapult, Shadow Rider. Just because those decks aren't on the list does not mean people won't play them in a tournament. When you go to New Jersey, like I'm going to New Jersey, there's almost 700 players in the TCG Masters. Like, it's a lot of people. Someone there is going to play a deck that's not on this list. But most of the decks in here are weak to fighting or dark, at least in some capacity, and that's where Arceus Birds really shined. Is probably one of my favorite decks in the format at the moment. I should say one of the better decks that I like to play. Again, I mentioned my favorite is Single Strike Urshifu. It's just not particularly good, so I probably won't be playing it. Another deck that I really like is Arceus Beedrills, and this is a very I don't want to say generic formula, but it's basically Arceus V-Star, Single Strike Beedrill with Single Strike Mustard, and then some kind of Vmax. So I've been playing the Lycanroc version of this, so it's Arceus Beedrill Lycanroc, and there's some other stuff in there too. The whole idea is to use your Pokemon, like your Arceus V and V-Star, to power up other Pokemon, whatever your Vmax line is, whether that's Lycanroc, Sandaconda, whatever it is. And then you also have the option of Single Strike Beedrill, because it has an attack, persist, sting, which for just a single grass energy can knock out any Pokemon that has a special energy attached to it. And let's go through the list real quick. Special energy, special energy, special energy, special energy. If they don't discard it with Gmax Rapid Flow, can be kind of annoying. Occasionally special energy in the form of capture energy, special energy and speed lightning energy, opposing Arceus special energy, probably not. Sometimes special energy, almost always on the Arceus. Special energy, special energy, special energy, special energy. They will bounce it back to the hand, so not likely, but sometimes. And then also occasionally special energy with capture energy. Like, your toughest matchups can be things like Suicune and Ice Rider, because they don't have to use the special energies. And, you know, once they see that Beedrill or the Mustard, then they're not going to put them in play, because why give you a free 2-prize KO or 3-prize KO or something like that? So it's a very good deck, and it has answers for a lot of the stuff in the meta, but it is extremely meta dependent. If we start going into a format where everyone's using basic energies, well, then this Beedrill becomes substantially less useful. But I really like it. It does have some consistency issues, because you don't have a lot of supporters in the deck, since you need, in order to play Single Strike Mustard, you can only have one card in your hand, and it has to be that Mustard. So you have to dump everything in your hand, which means you have to either discard it or play it. And if you have a bunch of supporters, well, then you're either going to be forced to discard them, which you can't always do, or play them. But if you play them, then you can't play Mustard. So you run a pretty low supporter count, and you rely on Mustard as being your draw support. So there are going to be times where you have to make, you have to choose. Do you make the optimal play, or do you make the Mustard play when you have the chance? And, you know, knowing that a deck might play special energies, do you threaten with the Beedrill and get it out, or do you do something a little bit different? Do you waste the resources discarding all the stuff, or just playing them and burning cards like Energy Search and Ultra Balls and whatever, and not get anything so you can make the Mustard play happen? A lot of decision making that you have to do in this deck, and it can be a little difficult, and can be a little, like I said, annoying and inconsistent. But when it works, it is very good, and I absolutely love it. Arceus Whimsicott is probably another tier 2 deck. It's really good at disruption. It's really good for dealing with decks that require special energies and tools like air balloons to kind of pivot. And since Trick Wind prevents it so your opponent can't play special energies or tools from their hand during the next turn, I've shut down Mew decks entirely with something like Path to the Peak and Trick Wind, and there's nothing they can do, and you end up winning the game, and it's a ton of fun. Again, if your opponent goes first and they get that double turbo energy, and you're not able to hammer it away, or you don't have the hammer or something, or they're able to pull off the Trinity Charge, maybe it's their turn 1, you go first, you attach, now I go attach double turbo to Arceus V-Star, and I start powering up my bench. Maybe I don't care anymore if you Trick Wind, right? I just need to, start attacking with my bench Pokemon. So the tool, I would probably care about the tool part more, not being able to attach an air balloon. But a lot of times Arceus can get around it, especially if they go second. And we did talk about, again, Ice Riders and Suicunes and decks that don't, or even Jolteon decks that don't necessarily have to attach special energies. So that can be a little bit challenging for you in that sense. But otherwise, I do kind of like the deck. Arceus Ice Rider is probably a tier 2. I think just straight Ice Rider is a little bit better. And I actually think Arceus Ice Rider is at the end of tier 1.5. And the reason is they both do the same thing. One uses Arceus to power up Ice Riders, and you're not as reliant on things like Melony to constantly attack. So now maybe you can play your research, you can play your boss, you can make things happen, just maybe a little less consistent. The regular Ice Rider Inteleon is a very middle-of-the-road deck. You are not super strong against anything, but nothing is particularly strong against you. It is just a solid deck, and you're able to one-shot Arceus V-Stars with Max Lance and a Choice Belt or a Leon or something like that. So, again, the big challenge with this deck is getting your Ice Rider set up, not letting them get boss KO'd immediately, and then also having to rely on using Melony pretty frequently to power up your Ice Riders, because Max Lance requires you to discard the energies in order to do more and more damage. So knowing when to discard one, knowing when to use Rider the High King is very important for an Arceus deck, for an Ice Rider deck. And but overall, I mean, I think it's still a solid deck, and I would still recommend it to people. I would still say, if you're not sure what to play and you want just a safe bet, Ice Rider is not a bad call. Another tier 1 deck is Rapid Strike Malamar. It is a single prize Pokemon deck, and it just can hit for crazy high damage. There are 2 variants of this. There's the build that uses Cinccino's and the build that uses Inteleons, and honestly, the Inteleon line is just better. In this particular deck, Targeted Search, I think, works really well. In some other decks, you might have just draw a bunch might work into your favor. But yeah, Arceus, the Rapid Strike, I keep saying Arceus because it's like happening so much. There's so much of it. Rapid Strike Malamar is just very good. I was playing in a tournament on Saturday. I had a Lycanroc Vmax with 0 damage in the active, and my opponent was able to just get 8 Rapid Strike cards into their hand and hit for 320, and oh my goodness, it was wild. I ended up losing that game pretty quickly, but the ability to just rack and stack damage like that was absolutely insane, and it's just really good. It does take a little bit of practice to get the sequencing and everything, but once you do, I think you'll be pleasantly pleased with this deck. Also, it's a very, very budget-friendly deck, costing maybe $35, $40 to buy everything, like everything. And if you've been playing for any period of time, you probably have some of the cards, which means you'll be spending less than $30 most of the time for the entire deck. Arceus Bibarel, I'm going to put kind of with the Arceus Beedrill stuff. You don't have the targeted search of the Inteleon, you just kind of raw draw with Bibarel, and it's a really good deck, and you can pair this with a bunch of different Pokemon. You can pair this with Dark types, you can pair this with Gengar is an option I've seen with this. I've seen Sandacondas and Lycanrocs, and it's a very versatile open. Pick Arceus and Beedrill and insert your preferred V-Star, Vmax, whatever. It's a really good formula. and it's Arceus, so you know it's going to be pretty good. Speaking of also being pretty good, I think an underexplored or underutilized Vmax is Malamar Vmax. Max Jammer is a pretty good attack, and it can help discard cards. Maybe your opponent is playing, holding on to that stadium so they can get rid of that path the next turn. Well, you can get rid of it. Also, you're going to hit things like Mew the next turn for things like weakness. Is it the best version of Arceus? Probably not. I mean, definitely not, at least not at the moment, but it's a good one. It's not weak to fighting, and actually does have, the Malamar has a grass weakness, so even if you are going against an Arceus Bird deck, you don't really have to worry about Zapdos destroying your entire deck like you do if you were playing Arceus Gengar or just straight Gengar. Something like that, you do have a grass weak Pokemon in there as well. And the last one is this Urshifu Melony. Oh boy, a regular Urshifu Melony is it's a really good deck. It's just, you know, you have Mew, you have Rapid Strike, Malamar. They are very good, very popular decks, and that is pretty much the only thing that's holding this deck back. You can knock out an Arceus V-Star with just a single fighting energy using Gale Thrust. I'll probably put this mid tier 2. So we'll put that mid tier 2, and I did change where my face is located because I didn't want to cover up the bottom left here. Once I added that, it kind of pushed everything down, and so yeah. And that's pretty much the tier list. Most stuff is going to fall into this tier 1.5, tier 2 list. That's just what a standard bell curve is going to look like. Realistically, there's probably another deck in tier 3. There's probably, you know, one of these tier 2 decks might be a tier 3. Could be single strike, and then you get something closer to a regular bell curve. But you know, again, it's opinions, it's subjective. My definition of what tier 3 is not necessarily someone else's tier 3. But yeah, that's the whole thing. So there you go. There is a tier list made for some of the most popular and best decks in the game. Use this with a grain of salt when trying to figure out what you want to play at a tournament, and I want to hear your opinions. What do you think of this tier list? How much do you agree or disagree with it? That's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, found this a little informative. If you did, subscribe, check out Dragon Shield, and maybe become a member if you're so inclined. But yeah, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.